to our town hall meeting with Congressman Jim McGovern. Thank you so much, Congressman, for being with us today. Also joined by Erin Williams, who is the head of the Worcester Cultural Coalition, who with the Mass Cultural Council is hosting this conversation with you today. First of all, I do want to acknowledge our thoughts and prayers for those who have been victims of the coronavirus. Nearly 100,000 people have died in the country so far, and it's been devastating to families, to lives and communities across this country. It has also been devastating to the cultural sector here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Our most recent data indicates that the cultural sector has lost more than $250 million in real-time income. The doors were slammed shut when we had to socially isolate, social distance, and shut down any venues where people connect. We've lost thousands and thousands of jobs due to the coronavirus, tens of thousands right here in our own cultural sector in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We want to talk to the Congressman today about how we can work with the federal government to restore our communities, to revitalize and recover from the coronavirus in the cultural sector, how to rebuild our sector, and how to renew the wonderful sense of community, the aspiration and the vitality that comes from a vibrant cultural sector here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It is core to our economy. When we rebuild the cultural sector, we're helping businesses on Main Street, cafes and shops and retail establishments who depend on our cultural anchors. When we rebuild the cultural sector, we're improving the educational opportunities for children in our state. Without the arts and culture in their curriculum, they won't be prepared for the creative economy that they'll be participating in the future. And when we rebuild our creative sector, we're going to be providing the sense of well-being and community that we all miss so much today as we're sequestered at home. So thank you all for joining us and being part of the conversation. We encourage your questions, your comments, your story sharing with us today. And for those of you who have not participated in an online Zoom town hall meeting before, if you'll just take a look down here at the bottom of your screen, you will see a little button that says Q&A. So at any time during the next hour, please just fill in any questions that you may have for the Congressman. I know he is ready to answer anyone. And Congressman McGovern is a huge champion of the arts and culture, and we're so happy to have him with us today. I'd also like to mention a couple of other people who are on the chat with us today. We have several elected officials. We have Senate President Emeritus Harriet Chandler, who is also from Worcester, Senator Mike Moore, and the House Chair of our Committee on Tourism, Arts, and Cultural Development, Representative Paul McMurtry of Dedham. And we also have a number of our Mass Cultural Council members with us as well, Troy Siebels and Sandy Dunn, who are both from the Worcester area, Ann Murphy, Kathy Castro, Barbara Schaefer-Bacon, and Elise Najimi are joining us as council members as well. So don't forget that little button, fill in your questions. But while you're thinking of your questions, I would like to turn it over to our partner, Erin Williams, who has helped us put together this forum today. Erin.
Thank you, Anita. And Congressman McGovern, it's always a pleasure having you present. As we remarked yesterday, we need a fireside chat, and today we have a kitchen side chat with you to engage in a conversation about creativity and bringing our communities back to life through the lens of arts, culture, and community engagement. You were very generous in years past in helping to frame out a cultural plan for the city of Worcester, along with our city manager, our community foundation, and the vast coalition of arts and cultural members who make up the Cultural Coalition. We're celebrating our 20th year, and what a year it is. Now more than ever, we realize that arts and culture aren't just a nicety in our communities, they are truly a necessity in difficult times. And we were working with you, with Anita, and with our sector to see how arts can lift us up, how cultural institutions can be supportive of the needs for food security, education, health and well-being, and especially serving our young people who are in so need right now, and those who aren't fortunate enough to have the security of having a home or a survival network. So the Cultural Coalition is partnering with Greater Worcester, with MCC, with Mass Creative and leadership here in the city for Worcester Together. And that's an initiative that embraces all leadership and activists in the community to make sure that we are addressing the needs of a healthy, vibrant reopening of the city, and look forward to your suggestions on how we might support your work and truly become a new form of creative expression in the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Thanks, Erin. Congressman, perhaps you'd open it up with just a frame up of what you're seeing from your vantage point in Congress in Washington, D.C., and maybe with a particular note to the fact that the states are suffering and our ability to rebuild our creative economy and our creative sector here is going to be heavily reliant on some sort of stimulus coming out of Washington.
Well, first of all, Anita, thank you, and Erin, thank you. It's great to see you, and and greetings to everybody on the call. I hope everybody is well. I want to thank everyone at the Mass Cultural Council and the Worcester Cultural Coalition for setting up this virtual town hall meeting. I am in my kitchen because my laptop ran out of juice, so this is the closest place I have a plug. But I have mounted my laptop on 2 macaroni boxes, so I hope this is a good view of me. But I also want to thank my friend Senator Harriet Chandler, who's on the call, Senator Mike Moore, and Representative Paul McMurtry for joining the conversation today. They're all incredible leaders on behalf of our creative community here in Massachusetts. Look, this COVID-19 crisis has affected us all. And you in your opening remarks referred to the terrible toll it has taken. We all know somebody who has been touched by this terrible virus, and we know people who've lost their lives. And we're not sure where we are in terms of this battle, whether we're nearing the end or whether or not things are going to get worse come the fall. But we need to be prepared. And I also want to say that I'm privileged to serve in a delegation in Washington that I think is second to none. I mean, my colleagues in the Massachusetts delegation and our 2 senators are extraordinary partners, and I know they're very, very sensitive to the issues that are concerning many people on the call. You know, as you all know, the arts and culture sector of Massachusetts is an important part of our economy. It's a vital part of our economy. And sometimes it's an underappreciated aspect of our economy. But we need to do all we can to help people get through this, our institutions get through this, because you're key to our getting back on track. I also think that what is represented on this call here today really defines us as a community, the things that we value. The art, the music, our museums and our theaters. I think it has a civilizing impact on all of us, as well as being an important part of our economy. As we all know, the arts and cultural sector come in all shapes and sizes, ranging from individual artists, small arts collectives, to major theater groups, orchestras, museums, and major art venues. And I have a district that has all of that, which I'm so proud of. I very much admire how artists are helping other artists during this time, forming their own safety net funds and grants programs to help struggling writers, musicians, visual artists, and others. It's been very moving to see these communities help and support one another. I just want to highlight a few stats from a survey of cultural organizations in the Worcester area, which I think really highlight the severity of the crisis. Respondents said that they have already lost an average of $244,000 in revenues to date due to COVID-19. Many respondents reported that they had to furlough or lay off workers, and that on average, those who were still working have had their hours and salaries reduced by nearly 40%. You know, I've heard from hundreds of my constituents who work in the gig economy, like freelance artists and independent contractors who are unable to work because of the pandemic. I'm glad that Congress was able to provide some relief by expanding unemployment insurance and creating the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. We have also allocated additional funding for the arts, including over $300 million for agencies like the NEA and NEH and the Institute for Museums and Library Services. But clearly more, and I mean a lot more, needs to be done to protect the arts in the cultural section. So, last week, the House of Representatives passed what we call the HEROES Act, which included an additional $25 billion for these agencies. But it would also provide for nearly $1 trillion for state and local governments. You know, one of the things that I, feel very strongly about is that we need to get money to our states, to the states, and to cities and towns, money with as much flexibility as possible to have them respond to the to whatever needs they feel are appropriate and urgent. These funds would not only allow state and local governments to support healthcare workers, fire departments, police, teachers, and more, but it would also allow for more flexibility to help artists, cultural institutions, and others who are struggling because of the pandemic. We also need to think about how to support our larger venues, which, if you read the guidelines from the CDC or any state venturing to reopen, will be among the last to reopen fully because they're set up to gather large crowds together in close proximity to enjoy or participate in a concert, a play, or other cultural work. So all of us will need to be creative about reimagining the use of these spaces and how we graduate from smaller audiences to larger audiences. I'll just say one final thing. We passed this package in the House, which I think will provide some much needed help to the concerns that are represented on this call. But we need to get the United States Senate to take it up. And the Senate Majority Leader has unfortunately said that he's not convinced yet that we need to do anything else. So I would urge you to talk to your counterparts in other states to get them to put pressure on their senators to say, we can't hurry up and wait. We need to do something now. It is urgent. So thanks for having me, and I look forward to your questions and comments and advice.
Thank you so much, Congressman. And thank you for sharing your obvious passion and concern around the cultural sector here in Massachusetts. I'd like to invite, and first of all, don't forget to put your questions on the Q&A. And we always do these with a certain element of forgiveness because we're only so good at the Zooms, especially the more people we get on board with us. And I can see right now we have well over 130 people joining us. But one of them is our Senate President Emerita Harriet Chandler from Worcester. And I'm waiting to see there. I see her name. So if we can get Harriet Chandler unmuted and get her image here on the screen, Senator Chandler, we would love to hear from you this morning.
Unmuted? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yeah.
Very good. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm delighted you're doing this. Anita and Erin and Congressman, we need this so badly. We talk a lot about the needs of people who are very vulnerable. Well, we forget it when we talk about that the arts community is very vulnerable to this. They've been quiet. They probably have not shouted enough to make their voices heard, but their voices have to be heard because they're among the most important places that we have in our whole society, and they will be a real key to coming back as a society. We're here to listen, and we're here to help, and we're here to any thoughts you have about what will make things easier for you. Clearly, the first step is to try to get the Senate to approve of the HEROES bill. That seems to be the first step. But we look forward to hearing any other recommendations that you might have that we can do at the state level for you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Chandler. And thank you for being with us and being part of our conversation today. I can see that Senator Michael Moore is also joined us now. If we can get Senator Moore unmuted, we would love to hear a few comments from you, Senator.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you, Erin and Congressman McGovern and Senator Chandler. I think this is great you're putting this on, because I really think as we're starting to reopen, people need to know how important our cultural facilities.
Well,
Am I there still, or?
yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Well, you disappeared from my screen. So thank you all for putting this on. So I think this is important for us to educate everyone on how important you are to us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. And I'm going to ask, do we have Chair McMurtry with us? I had seen his name come through before. I do not. There he is. Okay. Chair McMurtry, who is the co-chair of our Joint Committee on Tourism, Arts, and Cultural Development, has joined us now. If we can unmute Chair McMurtry.
Good afternoon, everyone. Anita, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Congressman McGovern, thank you so much for your leadership on a federal level. I appreciate these opportunities to Senator Moore and Senator Chandler as well, to listen and learn and see how that we can make sure that when the economy is ready to open full throttle, that we have on front and center the cultural organizations of the Commonwealth that bring so much to the everyday life. So I appreciate this opportunity. I'll listen in, and I look forward to hearing some questions and then applying whatever we can as your partners at the State House to make sure that we can work together to make America and the Commonwealth that resilient state that we are. So thank you for everyone's work on this on behalf of the organizations in the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Chair McMurtry. Erin, I'd like you to introduce, you have invited a couple of people from the Worcester area who can tell us from a personal level how the COVID crisis have affected them.
Sure. I'd like to introduce Grace Elton, who's the CEO of Tower Hill Botanic Garden, one of the oldest gardens in Massachusetts and perhaps in the country. She can clarify that for us. Mm-hmm. They are doing incredible work in bringing the living museum environment out into the community, and we are so fortunate to have them part of our cultural sector here. So, Grace, welcome.
Great, thank you so much, Erin. It's great to see everyone. A little bit about Tower Hill. We're a nonprofit botanical garden, 171 acres, just outside of Worcester in Boylston, Massachusetts. We have over 170,000 visitors per year, and we also educate over 13,000 youth and adults. We do a lot of work out in the community, as Erin mentioned. One program that Congressman McGovern is very familiar with is our Worcester Tree Initiative program, where we assist the city to improve our urban forest. We also engage every second grader from the city out at our garden through the Culture Leap program, that come and do free field trips out to the garden. So we're really excited about the work we do, but our work has essentially halted because we've been closed since March 16th. We employ 91 people to fulfill our mission. And right now is when we have most of our seasonal staff, or should have most of our seasonal staff on board, and the gardens are just looking fantastic. So we should also be earning the majority of our revenue for the year this year. 65% of our budget is covered by earned revenue. So that's gate admissions, weddings, facility rentals, events, membership sales, shop, cafe, we kind of have it all. But really all of that has disappeared. And just since March, we've experienced a revenue loss of over $1 million. So we did receive a PPP loan, which we were very, very grateful for, but that will only pay my staff through June 10th. And after that, I'm really uncertain of how to pay the staff. We will be opening our gates with the phased opening in the state in phase 1 on June 8th, just for the outdoor gardens only, but we're gonna really limit the number of people that we can bring on site. We'll use time ticketing to make sure that we're following all the rules and that we don't have too many people crowding. But with group sizes staying limited, I can't teach the classes I taught. I can't hold weddings. Really, even though we're opening, we can't recover that revenue and those revenue sources that we're used to. I'm also worried that when we do reopen, even in the next year, a lot of the functions that my essential staff perform won't exist anymore, since we won't be able to have those large classes and events. So a big concern is losing that talent that I've built and these amazing colleagues that are so creative and have great ingenuity. But also when I do have to reduce staff, a big concern is that we are self-insured like many other nonprofits. Congressman McGovern mentioned that the CARES Act did add some relief for uninsurance or unemployment insurance. but it really won't be enough for us because we're still going to have to pay 50% of those uninsurance claims. So, or unemployment insurance claims, excuse me. So I'm wondering if Congress will be adding more to the state unemployment trust funds to be able to help relieve some of that so we're not taking on the burden ourselves.
Thank you. Congressman?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, first of all, Tower Hill is incredible, and I can't say enough thanks to the partnership we've had with them on the Worcester Tree Initiative. We had this Asian longhorn beetle crisis here that took down all our trees, and Tower Hill has been a great partner in helping us replant and educate people, and so we love them. Look, on the PPP program, in the HEROES Act, we extended to December 31st. That's why it's important that be passed. So that provides a little bit more time. And there's also some provisions in the HEROES Act which would provide more flexibility for borrowers, including establishing a minimum maturity on PPP loans, which would allow for lower monthly premiums. And on the other question that you asked, I think we need to, we probably should have a further discussion because I think this 50% that you were talking about is significant, and we ought to. I mean, I'm not sure how we can, well, so we have to talk about. One of the things that we're talking about right now is there's a bill that's been introduced by my colleague from Washington State, Pramila Jayapal, which basically would kind of change the way that we are providing funding for workers. So, and as is to try to discourage them from going to unemployment insurance to actually providing direct assistance to pay the worker's salary if they stay associated with the job. We had talked about trying to do something like that in the HEROES Act. The problem is we just didn't have enough time to, work out all the details. But I mean, there's some creative out-of-the-box thinking that's going on about how we move to the future. But in the immediate short term, I think we need to have some conversations about, how we can tweak the HEROES Act if the Senate takes it up, maybe to alter some of the provisions, or, and I have to say this honestly, I think there's going to be other packages beyond this because we have no idea what the future is going to hold.
Thank you, Congressman. Erin, would you introduce our second commenter?
Our second guest is one of our intrepid cultural leaders here, not only in Worcester, but in central Massachusetts and really across the nation. That is An Vu Sawyer, and An is the executive director of the Southeast Asian Coalition of Central Massachusetts. Welcome, An.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anita and Erin, for putting all of this together. We're so lucky to have you and everyone here today. Of all the places, earlier this year, I was in Morocco for the Department of State Morocco U.S. Professional Fellow Program, and Congressman Jim McGovern was mentioned because of his integrity and his ability to have things done. So I really hope that today you will hear all of this and you will be able to help us to get lots of things done. Thank you. So I'm the executive director of the Southeast Asian Coalition in Central Massachusetts. We serve more than 15,000 client contacts annually, at least. Annually, we also have about 50 public performances, poet reading, oral history, sewing and weaving program to preserve the unique and disappearing Southeast Asian cultural heritage in the U.S. And we also contribute through that arts and culture, contribute to the local economic development as well. However, it's very sad to tell you, our funding for cultural programming is less than $5,000 a year. And during the COVID-19, in addition to helping with delivering food, reaching out to thousands of families with face masks, helping them to curb the virus spreading, we found out that arts and cultures is I would say, the most important factors for mental wellness. We found out that arts and cultures has been seen illuminately as a strong glue that hold all of us together like a mosaic during this crisis so that we would not fall apart. And even before the crisis, the COVID crisis, arts and cultures has been the one most effective factors to hold us together, to unite, to unify the community together. So I would like very much to ask, I thank you so much for Congressman Jim McGovern, Senator Chandler, and Senator Moore for your commitment to help the city of Worcester and the state through all of this. But I would like very much to have a stronger push for, to advocate and stronger push for more funding for arts and culture. We all know arts and culture is a healer for a lot of brokenness in our community. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Erin. I appreciate it. I don't know whether the my colleagues want to weigh in as well. Look, I agree with you, and again, I think arts and culture are, as you pointed out, are important factors in helping us maintain our sanity, especially during this this awful time. But it's also a way to bring people together and encourage, the development of our community as a true community. As I mentioned to you, we have included some significant resources in the HEROES Act that go beyond what has already been appropriated, which I think can be helpful. But look, we need to think beyond that. And one of the things I've been saying to people on various conference calls is that this pandemic has shown a lot of the cracks in our system. I mean, the great inequalities and the inequities, the programs that we have not funded properly, and how that has impacted us during this time. And so when people say, I can't wait to go back to normal, my response is, I don't want to go back to normal. I want to do better than normal. And I think, this is an opportunity for us to kind of look at everything and to not only try to figure out a way to get through this crisis, but, how do we go forward maybe a little bit differently? And some of that may be, additional federal funding. Some of that may involve the state or our local communities. But I, one of the things I want to say to people on this call is, I'm open to ideas and working with you to try to figure out, not only how we can get through this crisis, but how we can move beyond it and actually be better than we were before.
Congressman.
I forgot to mention that I would like to see more funding for cultural community-based organizations so that we will be able to engage the grassroots, the community members, all the way up to the city level. Thank you.
So there's more money, by the way, for CDGB, Community Development Block Grants, in this HEROES Act that will go to cities and towns. So again, for some of the stuff that you're talking about, I think that could be a source for additional funding, and the state will be getting more funding too. Okay.
Thank you so much, An, for joining us. Erin and I have been collecting questions ahead of time, and I'm going to ask Erin to get to one of those in a minute, but I know we have several that are already lined up in our Q&A. And first of all, Congressman, you have a lot of fans out there because most of them start by heaping praise on all the wonderful work that you're doing. But I want to start with one from Abigail Norman, who says, thank you again for joining us today, and brings up, this has come up a couple of times in our Q&A, remember the New Deal, remember the Work Progress Administration, remember how we used to put artists to work in times of depression and economic downturns. So much was accomplished by that historic effort, both in terms of bolstering artists and makers and in terms of rebuilding the economy and providing important cultural services during the Great Depression. Abigail is curious to hear your thoughts on this as a possibility.
Yeah, well, I agree. I mean, I'm a New Deal Democrat. Some of what complicates things is the United States Senate and the current occupant of the White House. But in the HEROES Act, there was an additional $3 billion, for the Department of Labor workforce training programs, to basically, that could be helpful. And those kinds of ideas go back to the New Deal. I'll go back to my answer in the previous question. I think we need this kind of big, bold, out of the box thinking as we move forward. Because the one thing that I think we need to understand is that this crisis that we're in right now doesn't just end, a week from Tuesday, or on a date certain. That in fact, all we're doing right now is we're trying to keep things viable so that people can make it to when the economy opens up again. But when it opens up again, we're going to have to do a lot more stimulus to kind of jumpstart things. And I agree. I supporting our artists, supporting our musicians, supporting our museums, supporting our creative community in general. I mean, is not only great for our community, but it is also, it's an economic stimulus. I mean, it was pointed out before. I mean, where there are museums, there are usually cafes, there are restaurants, there are stores, where there are theaters. I mean, there's all this economic activity that goes on around it, including, places, for the performing arts and little artists and places for artists to be able to, individual artists to be able to display their work. I mean, there's there's such a ripple effect here. So I think if we get some different leadership, in the coming months, we should be talking. This should be a big part of whatever our new deal is going to be. But I'm with you on this. And so, and again, I have seen how many of the people on this call have impacted the communities I represent. I mean, I've seen how the museums have, and the Hanover Theater has impacted Worcester. I mean, all the ripple effects. The Tower Hill, the impact that has had. But even some of my smaller towns that used to be manufacturing hubs, that manufacturing left. I mean, the arts community has come in and helped make them alive again. I mean, it's the future. So, we should work together to find creative ways to move forward on this. But I think we ought to be thinking big and bold. That's what the times demand.
And that's what our field is good at.
Right.
Erin, you have a question that we've collected from earlier.
Yes. Congressman McGovern, along your point about thinking big and bold, the New Deal opened horizons for arts, culture, and creativity to be participating in the infrastructure of rebuilding the United States. Are there opportunities for us to think outside of sectors of arts and culture as being something separate, but being included within our thinking about infrastructure for our roads? One thing we've learned here in Worcester just through this 10-week period, by bringing culture with engineers, along with medical folks, scientists, and activists, we are problem solving in a way that we have never done before. So when we begin to think about funding, how is it that the cultural sector can be embedded in funding for, say, public health initiatives, which we need now more than ever, around equity and inclusiveness issues in regards to education, in regards to business? When we're sitting now at the Worcester Together Business Roundtable, we have that ability to sit there and express that $126 million is brought in through revenues to the economy in addition to that social capital. Is there thinking on the Hill about cross-sector funding rather than just in a silo?
Yeah, there is. I mean, actually, Speaker Pelosi has talked to us about that on a number of occasions. But you mentioned the Worcester Together project. I mean, part of the reason why that is working as well as it is because there is a forum to bring everybody together. everybody's in the room together. Everybody's contributing. Everybody has a unique perspective. That's a great model. And when this pandemic is over with, we ought to figure out a way to keep that coalition together, as we deal with some of the challenges that the city is going to face. But, we ought to also be thinking about creative language and some of the major bills that are going to be coming up in the not too distant future. We're going to have to pass a transportation and infrastructure bill. How do we write it in a way that would encourage the kind of collaboration that you just talked about, and that would, where there would, potentially be even funding, for, some of the cultural community to play a role in some of the design of whatever the infrastructure is that we're trying to put together, or to offer a perspective, on design or whatever. The possibilities are endless here. I guess what I would say is that, you've given me you give me something to think about here, but what I'd like to do is maybe work with you, maybe to kind of pull together a smaller working group, and maybe help arrange some conversations with the Speaker's office in DC to figure out specifically how we can make this happen. And locally, I think we're doing it right now. We have to keep that going, right? Sometimes the biggest challenge is getting everybody in a room that needs to be in a room. And when you do it and do it right, we have benefits. And you just talked about the Worcester Together project. But I'd like to maybe work with you to actually flesh this idea out a little bit more, because I think you have more expertise than I do about all the different possibilities that are out there. But I'd love to set up maybe a conversation, with our leadership and you, and let's figure out what we can do.
Terrific.
Thank you, Congressman. We have lots more questions that are coming in on our Q&A, and I encourage other people to add on. This one is from Dora St. Martin, and I think she's reflecting a lot of the thinking around our eagerness to reopen, but also to keep our staff safe, to keep our visitors and our audiences safe when we do so. She asks, how can we protect ourselves from liability issues when we decide to allow people back into our buildings or share our objects through loans and other ways that we interact? Our field is all about socially connecting, and socially connecting is one of the more hazardous aspects of the coronavirus. So as we start to introduce our audiences back into our facilities, Dora wants to know how we can protect ourselves from any liability issues.
Well, that's, I guess the short answer is, following the public health guidelines and all of us being mindful of what they are and reopening in a safe and careful way. The liability issue is something that is being brought up, and this is kind of the first time I'm hearing it from this group, but mostly from a lot of other industries that, quite frankly, I worry that granting blanket liability might mean that we're protecting bad practices and actually punishing good practices, because not everybody's equal here on that issue. But yeah, that's a good question, and I'm not sure what the liability would be for in the cases of like a museum or a theater or whatever. As long as I think you're in compliance with whatever the state and federal guidelines are. Let me just say this: people have been asking me, what do you think about the governor's plan to reopen the state? I think the governor's done a very, very good job, but I'm just concerned, right? Because I'm worried that everybody's not prepared. I hope I'm wrong on that. But my worry is that if we open up and we're not prepared and we open up prematurely, then we'll have to shut down again. And I think that would be disastrous. And I'm frustrated that there are mixed messages that are being sent to the general public and to the business community. I think, again, the governor, has done a good job. The legislature has done a good job. Our city manager, our mayors have done great jobs. But from the White House, we're being told you should all wear masks, but I'm not going to wear a mask. That we got to listen to the science and to the medical expertise, but I'm not going to listen to the science and the medical expertise. So there's these mixed messages that I worry will be translated into an opening that might not be as safe and as careful as we want it to be. I mean, we have an economic crisis, but let's be clear, you're not going to solve the economic crisis unless you deal with the health crisis. I mean, they're linked, and there's no shortcuts here. But maybe you can, on the liability issue, maybe somebody from somebody's legal department can maybe get me some more specifics on, on what concerns specifically are there with regard to that, and maybe some potential remedies. But right now we're being asked for blanket liability by the nursing home industries and and I'm a little concerned about just doing that, because I want to make sure everybody's adhering to the best medical guidance.
Thank you, Congressman. Erin, did you have another question for us from the field? Unmute.
Thank you for reminding me. I was trying to be a good citizen and mute. I have a question around sustainability for cultural institutions. Beyond the NEA, NEH, and IMLS, the CARES Act and HEROES Act both allocate meaningful funds for the National Endowment for the Arts, National Endowment for the Humanities, and the Institute for Museums and Library Sciences. These crucial dollars are being distributed to arts, cultural organizations throughout the Commonwealth and your district. Thank you for this extremely important funding. However, the funds allocated will not protect the diverse ecology of arts and cultural organizations through the Commonwealth and your district. More is needed. Beyond advocating for additional funding as mentioned, are there ways such as the Community Development Block Grant, NIH, transportation, or other programs available that we might tap into? And are there conversations such as that happening on the Hill?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, there are. I mean, one is, as I mentioned, we're putting more money into the NEA, and other kind of cultural agencies and organizations to be able to provide more opportunity for grants. But also in the HEROES Act, we are providing, as I said before, direct assistance to states, cities, and towns in the form of CDBG money for our cities and towns that can be used to provide grants to, whatever they deem is appropriate. And my guess is that a lot of what is represented on this phone call is exactly the type of, a grant that a lot of our cities and towns would be likely to want to embrace. Again, and it'll also be additional money to the state, which again has maximum flexibility. So in addition to what happens at the local level, the state could actually complement it as well. But there was an additional $5 billion for community development block grants that was included in this bill as well. So yeah, there'll be opportunities. And I think that's because, one of the things that we're realizing is that on the federal level, I mean, again, this pandemic has impacted everything. I mean, everything imaginable. And it's hard to kind of write, a bill that takes into account or has a line item for every single, economic challenge that may be out there. And so I think that's why many of us believe that we should be able to get this assistance directly to states and local communities, provide them maximum flexibility, and so they can, get them to the people who need it.
Thank you, Congressman. This is a comment to you from Patrick Norton, who I believe you know. He would like to thank you for your longtime support of the Narrows Arts Center. You were a believer when very few people were, he says. National Independent Venue Association is pushing to extend PPP to be more inclusive to long-term shutdowns. And he said he is also, in his group, is wary of early reopenings without clear messaging and guidelines. And some of the questions, and I don't expect you to be able to answer every little detailed question, but it does suggest that there is a real hunger for more specific information, such as what is a large venue? What is the definition of a large venue? If I am a theater and I take my performances outside, then I qualify as an outside venue as opposed to an inside venue? And to your point about the nuances of what a definition is and what in the cultural landscape, cultural production looks like is very specific to place. Right. And I think there's a real hunger for just a lot more guidance and a lot more information around that.
Well, look, I agree with you. And let me just say to my friend Patrick Norton, who he worked with me, and he is responsible for the creation of the Narrow Center for the Arts in Fall River, which is wonderful. And I used to represent Fall River, and what he has done is so incredible. And basically took an idea that nobody thought was particularly promising and turned it into this incredible place right now. But look, I look at the guidelines. The president has basically washed his hands of national guidelines, and he's basically said to the states, "You figure it out." And so the governor's office is going to have to provide those specific guidelines here in Massachusetts, and that's one of the reasons why I have a little bit of angst when I read through the proposal that they put forward, just because there's a lot that's still very vague to me. And I'm told that it would all be flushed out, but I'm just really concerned, and I'm concerned that people may interpret the vagueness one way, and others may interpret it a different way. And I don't want anyone to get in trouble, and I want everybody to be in compliance with whatever the state intends. But but the more specificity, the better. And I'm also, again, I'm worried about the safety of everybody. I mean, I walk, just in my community, I've been to places where people seem to be taking this very, very seriously. And I've been to other places where I'm concerned. I tell, somebody criticized me on social media because I wear my mask all the time. I say, I wear my mask to protect you, and you wear your mask to protect me. That's the way this is supposed to work. And, but I think we need more specificity, and I think the governor, who I think has done a good job, will provide us that. But I am a little nervous, and I share those concerns.
Thank you, Congressman. Erin, another question.
Inclusion and equity. This pandemic has shifted a spotlight on the disparities in our communities. Black and brown citizens are more likely to suffer from unemployment, lack of PPE, food insecurity, overcrowding housing, and lack of access to the internet for virtual education and programming for young people. Is there progress being made to provide universal broadband access to all communities? Can a Federal Utilities Act similar to the Federal Utilities Act of the 1930s be implemented?
Yeah. So the HEROES Act contains $1.5 billion in funding for the FCC's E-rate program, which would let schools and libraries loan out internet hotspots and connected devices to help with distance learning, which is, I represent some communities that are challenged right now in terms of broadband. It also includes $4 billion for broadband subsidies for low-income families or those who have been laid off or furloughed, who need help paying their internet bills. Unfortunately, the Senate Majority Leader has said that he doesn't think broadband should be included in any of these stimulus packages. But if this is a stimulus, I don't know what the hell is. And it's, again, not only important so that our kids who may be out of school can be able to continue to learn, but again, in some of these smaller towns, and again, a lot of local artists are beginning to open up shops and studios. It's impossible to do business, if you're not connected to the internet, if you don't have broadband. So we need to fix that. The other thing is, in terms of the PPP and the CARES Act, we made an effort to try to make sure that a certain percentage of that money was being administered by mission lenders, people who have a history of working with our minority communities and underserved communities. And in the HEROES Act, we're trying to even extend that even more. It's not, It's not all that I think we would want, but at least we're moving in that direction.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question is from Anna Sengupta. They write, many economic reopening strategies are built around an employer-employee model, while many creative workers are contractors who rely on accessing opportunities across sectors and across state lines. With the current reopening model, these workers seem to be responsible for protecting themselves while navigating vastly different organizational approaches and even different state rules and regulations. How do we ensure that the health of these creative workers is protected so they don't need to choose between health and safety in earning an income?
As we move forward here, I'm going to go back to what I said in the beginning. I think that that we need to take a whole different look at at how we are administering assistance to people who are out of work at this particular point or can't work, and a lot of the people who are represented by people on this call. I mean, I think we ought to be paying direct assistance to people, as long as they stay associated with their job, rather than rather than the unemployment compensation program and some of these other schemes. I mean, I'm just worried that again, given the diversity of the workforce here, that it is unmanageable for many people to be able to kind of get through this. We're trying to take some steps to address the workers in the gig economy and that kind of stuff. But I think we need a different approach to how we move forward. And I mean, we've heard a lot from people in the creative community who have expressed concern about the way things are being administered, that they don't fall into this category, that category, that category. I think we need to have some more flexibility in what we're doing here.
Erin, if you'll let me jump ahead, we have a question now from Emily Reddick, who is the head of Mass Creative here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And Emily writes, following up on the CDBG comment, thank you, Congressman McGovern, for your longtime support and dedication to the people of your district, of our whole entire Commonwealth, I would add, and the creative sector. We are lucky that you and your staff see how core our work is to the strength and health of the Commonwealth. Some cities in Massachusetts already do include creative economic development work as an allowable use, but some do not. How will you and your colleagues in the Massachusetts congressional delegation work to urge local municipalities to do this now when they have difficult choices regarding how to spend those dollars? And we know dollars are going to be tight here in the Commonwealth. I believe just yesterday our Senate President Spilka said she's looking at a $5 to $8 billion shortfall in revenue in the coming fiscal year. Emily writes, we need more visible elected officials to be arts and cultural champions like you to help us access more support for our crucial and essential work.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, I mean, just speak for myself. I mean, if there are communities in my district that are not, open to the idea of supporting some of the incredible efforts that are represented by the people on this call, please let me know. And I will, call the mayor, the town manager, the city manager, whoever, and happily be an advocate. I think that's the case for, I think, everybody in this delegation. As I said before, I have communities in my district that were basically dying economically because they used to be, manufacturing hubs, and then manufacturing left, have reinvented themselves basically through the arts community. And they've done so with with the support of their local governments and some state and some federal assistance as well. They have transformed communities. They have made communities more livable, more desirable. They have increased tourism to this state. It's been an amazing transformation. So, I mean, I get it. Dollars are going to be tight, but we want to be investing in things, that are going to, that are going to stimulate additional economic growth. And again, the cultural institutions, our arts community. I mean, in addition to making our life more pleasant and wonderful and great and fabulous, I mean, you actually help stimulate economic growth even in the most unlikely places. So yes, let us know. I will call whoever in my district, and I'm sure my colleagues will do the same in their districts.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Erin, one last question from you.
Congressman McGovern, if you could wave your magic wand, how would you introduce arts education in a deep way as we move forward with our educational structure? And how can we make sure that arts are well represented in the thinking around creative community development?
Well, we all talk about STEM education. I'd like to talk about STEAM education, right? With arts as a part of it. Look, I mean, a lot of these decisions have to be made locally, but as I said at the beginning, and I wasn't just paying you a compliment, but I think the arts and culture and music, I mean, they have a civilizing impact on our communities. I remember a long time ago hearing a speech by the late Mario Cuomo when he was lamenting about the fact that in some neighborhoods in New York, some of the poor neighborhoods, that you might have a child that will hear the sound of gunfire before she hears the sound of a symphony. Mm-hmm. And we have so much that we can be proud of, and so much that can have a positive impact on our community in so many ways. Ann was talking about the mental health and stability of people during this crisis. Well, the arts can play a role in helping deal with that. Having our kids be more appreciative of the arts, I think is a gift that we should be giving them. And I wish we had a Secretary of Education in Washington that was like-minded, but she's not. I mean, so we just got to put that aside. But I'm happy to work with any and all of you to figure out ways that we can emphasize this point and try to encourage our local officials to make sure that arts education is more integrated in our schools. I mean, it is so incredibly important. And I was a history major in college, and there's a number of ways to learn history, but you can learn the history of great cultures through music and art as well. You can learn about great moments in history through the arts. It impacts everything. And again, I'm fortunate enough to represent a district that is rich in terms of a creative community, and I've seen it transform cities and towns in the most amazing way. Even in Worcester, I mean, it's like, our museums and our art museum, our Hanover Theater, in Boylston, our Tower. I mean, go right down the list. I mean, I shouldn't start listening, because now people are going to say you didn't list me. But it's just like, I feel so privileged to live here, to be able to take advantage of all of that. I mean, it's just such an amazing, wonderful asset to our community. So, but we need to start focusing in on education. I mean, I'll just close with this. I had a friend of mine who's an expert on mindfulness. He's tried to get me into it. I can't, for whatever reason, I can't focus. But anyway, but he said the next best thing, to encourage, kind of peace of mind and to be able to help self-regulate is the arts. We're a great country. We ought to understand that we're great in large part because of the arts and culture of this country. And but I want to work with all of you. I'll just close by saying this. Look, if there are questions that I haven't answered here, get them to me, and we will get you an answer. If we want to follow up on any of the things about how we can integrate, the cultural community in some of the other initiatives, whether it's transportation or whatever, let me know and we could try to arrange something, with the Speaker's office, because some of these bills are in the drafting stage. And if we want to talk about how we can advance the arts locally, let me know, and I'm happy to have a conversation with whatever local leader is appropriate. But this is important, and this is not an afterthought, or isn't it nice to have a vibrant cultural community? For those who don't appreciate our cultural community, they ought to appreciate it, because you are a major economic engine in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Without you, we are in deep, deep trouble. So we need to keep you not only viable, but we need to keep you in good shape so that when we get beyond this, you can do all the fabulous things that you always do.
Essential for our health and for our economy. Congressman Jim McGovern, thank you so much for all the time you've given us today, for your attention to the questions and your thoughtful comments. Erin, thank you very much for co-hosting this with the Mass Cultural Council and the Worcester Cultural Coalition. And I'd also like to thank Senators Harriet Chandler, Michael Moore, and Rep. Paul McMurtry for sticking with us throughout today and listening to the concerns and the questions from the field. And thank you all for participating in our town hall meeting with Congressman Jim McGovern. Have a good day.
Thank you all.